Hey, Kip, it's good to see you back. I don't know whether the guys who are listening thought that you would be back or not based on our last conversation. So I don't know how they feel
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. Well, you know what? And depending on how you feel about it, we may not want to know. So just keep your opinions to yourself.
Well, it's good to know that you do actually listen to the podcast occasionally. So
Yeah. Yeah. I like
Sean and
that
I were
whole,
testing
we'll
you.
see if Kip listens or not. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And you did.
Uh,
You passed the test. So you're still in. And if you didn't,
no.
then you were out. So I'm glad you made the right
Well,
decision.
my mom actually texted me, said, "Hey, I was listening to hear you, and these guys said crap about you." I thought, oh,
Yeah,
okay, I
that's
better
right.
listen. Yeah.
Well, it's good to see you back, man. You were doing a lot of things. I got people were sending me messages of like, look, I'm with Kip. I'm like, I don't care if you're with Kip. Like, why are you sending me texts about your pictures with Kip, making me feel
Who's
bad for
Kip?
not being at the muster?
Yeah, it was
Was
deer hunt, a mad scramble one day at Disneyland, and then off to the muster in Vegas. That
How
was
was the
my
one day at Disneyland? Were you able to hit one ride the whole entire day? And
yeah. It rained, and so it wasn't bad because most people bailed out. So
oh, that's
we were
true.
so we
I
went
will
for it
say
and got
that
soaked.
October at Disneyland is actually, I was going to say it's not good. It's not good. It's more manageable than the rest
Yeah.
of the time.
Dude, what was great is and I think Disneyland was closed, but right in the peak of COVID, we went to Universal Studios. We went to Orlando.
I like Universal
It
Studios.
was awesome.
Yeah.
Like literally no lines on anything. I'm like, this is
Perfect.
so worth wearing a mask if I don't have to wait in any lines. Like
Perfect.
it was pretty slick. I'm sure that's gone. That opportunity has passed itself for all of you guys.
Yeah. And then the deer hunt, how did that go?
I mean, it was, I didn't even get to fire my weapon. So, but we saw a few does. My brother drew on a buck for a moment and just didn't have a clean shot.
Wait, was it an
And
archery hunt?
no, I'm sorry. I had glass
Just
on
drew
it.
up
I
his
don't know.
rifle. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
That just a hell of a lot of hiking. So I was all over that mountain.
Was that in
but it was good.
Delta area? Is that where you guys hunted, or where did you hunt?
No, we drew tags in the Manti region.
Oh,
So we were
got it.
just north of Mount Pleasant
Yeah.
in those mountains. So
Cool.
it was, but
Yeah.
you know how it is. Like even if we don't get to fire weapons, it was me, my two brothers, and my brother's three boys. And so it was the five of us up there. It was
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. We had youth day not this last week and the weekend before. So there's one day for youth in Maine. And then we had Maine resident day, which was Saturday. And so we went out both days. We didn't see a single thing. And it was funny because I was texting my neighbor. I saw my neighbor yesterday at some Halloween thing, like a trick or treat thing. And he was like, how did it go? And I'm like, it was okay. We spent some time together. It was fun, but we didn't see anything. He's like, yeah, it was slow for me. I saw 23 does and one buck. I'm like, get the hell out of here. That's not slow. You trying to rub it in on me or what? I'm like, I needed you to teach me your secrets, man. But
yeah. Well,
yeah.
it's like ours, like we went, we had a hike through private land. Like there's like a little hiking path, to get through this property. The fields are just full of deer and bucks. And I'm like,
Those
there's so much irony
man.
of just walking by all these,
and you can't shoot them
to go to the mountains to not find anything. It's like,
yep. Those deer know, man. It's like you wouldn't think, but they know. Turkeys know, deer know. Yeah. Well, anyways, it's good to have you back, man. We got some good questions that we're fielding from the Facebook group, I think, today. So you and I hand selected a few of these, and I think they're pretty good questions. So let's get after it.
Yeah, sounds good. So like Ryan said, these questions are coming from the Facebook group. To join us there, go to facebook.com/groups/orderman. All right. First question.
Kip, before you get into that,
yep.
One thing I do want to make sure the guys know is that by the end of this week, we're actually going to be shutting down registration for the Iron Council for the month of November. And we're probably going to be opening it up in December, barring just or contingent on some things that we have in place, because we really want to make sure we put a heavy emphasis on our current members, which is almost 1,000 members now. And These guys have really big, lofty goals for 2022. And we want to make sure we give them all the support they need, and then putting into some strategies and concepts that we want to implement come 2022. So if you're interested in joining the Iron Council and you've been on the fence, like, get signed up in the next couple of days. Otherwise, it's going to be 30 to 60 days before you'll be able to join us. And then you'll be behind the 8 ball as it comes into the new year. So get joined up right now.
There you go. All right. Kyle Schweiger, how do you balance chasing my dreams and providing for my kids? They seem to be counterintuitive. They live pretty well now. When is enough?
Man, unless you want to go like run away with a circus, I'm not really sure that they're at odds with each other. I can't imagine a scenario like, hey, I want to do this and it's at odds with providing for my family. Really? Like, there's people that have created the dumbest shit, selling the dumbest shit. Like, look at these like, what's Jake and Logan Paul? Like, look at them. Like, they've created this empire out of nothing. And what are they selling themselves? Like, that's it. Their ability to be annoying. That's what they're selling. And so, like, what are you trying to sell that's at odds with putting food on your kids' table? I mean, look, we live in this incredible time, unlike any other time in history. There's so much prosperity. There's so much abundance. I mean, think about what we do with Order of Man. We're talking about how to be a better man. And we're making 7 figures doing this. Like, come on now. I just don't think they're at odds. And if you think they're at odds, that's probably what your hurdle is. So you're creating odds and barriers that just aren't there. So yeah, I actually would like to know more about this question. Like, what is it that you think you want to do or pursue that would be at odds with you providing for your family? I just don't see that being the case unless it's some sort of weird, obscure. And even in that case, there's a bunch of weird, obscure people who would buy whatever it is that you're interested in selling or offering. So I don't see why this would be at odds with providing for your family. I commend you for wanting to do that, but it's not at odds with it.
Well, and I would say that Ryan, you chasing your dreams is part of being a good parent, right? To show your children, like, this is what it looks like to go after and to have a meaningful life and to pursue something that you've always wanted to pursue, right? That's part of parenting. I find it interesting that we even do this with work. I think sometimes is we'll go, well, work is from, let's say, 9 to 5 and families from here and fatherhood is no, they're all intertwined with how I show up at work should be the same. It develops me into a man that shows up as a father in life. Like, it's who I am being in life as a whole. And some of it we might classify as work, but they're very much part of the same thing. I think so. I think they all support each other.
Yeah. I mean, your ability to make income isn't the only determinant factor of whether or not you're a good father. It's an important factor for sure, because you got to put food on the table and a roof over your kids' head. Sure. But it's not the only factor. And it's a bit of a false dichotomy. It's like the question, Kip, we get all the time about guys who are like, well, should I go work this job that has the potential to be the best thing ever and pursuing my dreams, or do I stay in this other job and be miserable but make good money? Like, you can actually have both. You can make great money and you can pursue something more meaningful. In fact, I think in this day and age, you can make more money pursuing something that is meaningful. Like, the fact that it's meaningful and significant and important to you will over time gradually mean that you're going to make more income. Why? Because income is a metric of value. And the more valuable you can be to other people, the more money that you're inevitably going to make. So it's a bit of a false dichotomy. And I really think that you can have your cake and eat it too in this scenario. And you should be working towards that. Now let's address this though, and give them some pointers here. Just because you're pursuing your dream doesn't mean you need to be reckless. So a lot of guys have that burn the boats, burn the bridges mentality.
Yeah.
And I do understand that to a degree. And I think at some point you really need to take that leap of faith.
Depends who's on the boat, right?
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah. And what you have to risk and what you have to loot. Like, there's a lot of choices here.
Yeah.
So at some point you do have to commit and you do have to take a leap of faith, but you don't have to burn the boat. Like, I didn't burn the boats when I started Order of Man. I was doing my full-time financial planning practice. I did it for about 2 years before I finally sold the practice and went full bore with Order of Man. But by the time I did that, I was already making significant income with Order of Man. So it's nice. It's a nice little tweet or a nice little meme or quote on Instagram about burning the boats and like all that kind of look, I get it. But also the reality is you don't have to do that. You can be working a job right now and you can be really good at that job. And one of the things that Kip, you say all the time, which I really appreciate, is you talk about becoming the best in your current occupation, your current line of work. And that's going to help you either feel more valuable and meaningful where you are, but it's also going to help you develop and build skill sets for when you do eventually maybe make a leap. So be the best where you are, but also have a plan where you're gradually phasing out of this and moving over to this. It's a seamless transition, not an abrupt stop.
Yeah. One question for you, Ryan, because I think this might be what some men might be thinking as they listen to us is, but what's the red sign? What's the flag for you of, hey, you know what? I'm putting work, or AKA chasing a dream, too high of a priority. What would you use as a measuring stick to say, hey, you know what, this is too much, right? And I am putting that before my family or above a higher priority.
I really think we need to measure our commitments. So when you married your wife, you made a commitment to honor her, to respect her, to till death do you part. And if your own selfish desires and aspirations are getting in the way of your prior commitments, that's a problem. So if it's creating rifts in the marriage, if it's not allowing you to, because when you signed up to have children, and when I say signed up, I mean when you decided to get it, right? Like you didn't literally sign up, but you know what I'm saying? When you signed up to have kids, then you made a commitment to honor those kids, to teach them, to respect them, to be there, to be present, to teach them, to father them, et cetera, et cetera. And if your work is getting in the way of that commitment, then that's a problem, right? So I think you have to weigh it in comparison to your other commitments and obligations and responsibilities. And sometimes that means you need to sacrifice, quite honestly. Like it would have been nice if when I started Order of Man, if I could have just went from day one, just went and just ran with it. And I think we'd be a lot further ahead today if I did that. Actually, maybe not. I don't know. I'll explain that in a minute. But I couldn't do that because I already made commitments to my wife and my kids to protect them, to provide for them, to put food on the table, to put a roof over their head. My wife wasn't working. She's staying at home with the kids. So I had commitments, and I've had to put a deliberate throttle on the business, actually.
Yeah.
Because I made those commitments, and I make that consciously. Like it isn't something I'm unaware of. I'm very aware of that. I've made those conscious choices and decisions. So I think when it's at odds with your other commitments is where it becomes a problem.
Got it. Okay. Talking about burning bridges or boats, I mean, Jason Schmidt, when you've made the decision to burn the boats and go all in on your path, what's the best method to keep the doubt at bay to allow you to stay the course? I found that this is the hardest part.
I mean, if you look, I think it's natural to have doubts about where you're going and progressing and moving forward, even if you have quote unquote burn the boats, but like you don't have time to entertain that because you burn the boats. Like you just said, if I've burned the boats completely, then you really don't have time to entertain what if it goes wrong? Because what's your backup plan? Well, you don't have one. That's the actual whole point of burning the boats.
Yeah, I mean, let's be frank, right? The whole phrase is the idea of being fully committed to doing whatever you're doing, right? Without this idea of, well, I got this plan B, so when it gets tough, I'll just go with plan B.
And that doesn't mean that you're going to free yourself of doubt and frustration and worry and concern. When I married my wife, I made a commitment, an eternal commitment to be with her. And I still had doubts. When I go all in on the business with Order of Man, there's still days where I'm like, I don't know if this is the right thing to do, but my path is forward, not backwards. Right. So like if my marriage is struggling, and it has in the past, my path isn't to retreat and look for a divorce and separation and withdraw. My path is, how in the world are we going to get through this moving forward?
Yeah.
And that's a much more productive way to look at it. Look, everybody has doubts. That's okay. Not everybody has solutions. So if you can be the man who figures out solutions to his problems, you're going to be much more valuable than the man who has doubts and doesn't do anything about it. Because a lot of guys, what they'll say is, well, I'm worried about X, Y, and Z. Okay. We've talked about this in the past, Kip. That's incomplete.
Yeah.
We're all worried about X, Y, and Z. Everybody's worried about that. The next half of that sentence is, I'm worried about making enough income. So I am going to try this form of marketing. I'm worried about making sure that I provide enough value to my clients. So I'm going to go above and beyond so that they get maximum value and they want to refer people to me. See, that's the complete thought. Most of us just kind of stop abruptly and we don't really think about. Imagine the burn the boats mentality, or that analogy. I think it was some Spanish conquistador, maybe Cortez or somebody that we get this story from. Imagine if he's like, hey, I'm going to burn all these boats and then we're just going to sit on the beach and see what happens. Yeah. That's not how it went. We're going to burn the boats and then we're going to march forward. Here's our strategy. Here's our plan. Here's our maneuvers. We're trained to do this and we're going to go forward. Yeah. And that's the complete thought.
And we should probably confirm if it was Cortez, and I would assume that he didn't burn the boats because he needed them burnt. He burnt the boats so his men would be forced to follow him and they wouldn't bail out on him. Like, I really don't think, like Order of Man, for instance, you didn't need to burn any boats. You can actually be committed to something and be committed to a plan, execute against it, and actually see what happens. I actually think that most doubt comes in because people start questioning the plan. Mm-hmm. And they go, oh, well, I'll just think of workouts, for instance, right? I have a regimen. I've done my research. I go, okay, this is the diet. This is the workout plan I'm going to commit to. The doubt isn't your commitment. The doubt is this the right plan? And it's a little bit of a lie in the sense of, well, this is kind of hard. And maybe this isn't the right plan, versus maybe your commitment necessarily shouldn't be so much to the results, but just be committed to the plan and actually see it through and say, hey, I have a plan. I'm going to commit to showing up and doing my best job in the plan. I'm going to trust the process and then see what happens. But we look beyond it and go, oh, well, you know what? My waist isn't any thinner than it was, and my weight's going up. And then they start doubting the plan. And in some cases, as we know, like even in the Iron Council, it's like most guys in the IC, if they looked at their battle plan and said, if I executed 100% on it, and we looked at it retrospectively and said, man, if I did what I had in that plan last quarter, 100%, we would all almost 100% agree I would have been so much better off. But yet we don't execute against it because we just get wrapped up. And I think it's just it's the lie and it's the excuse. And we're looking for excuses because things get a little tough.
Well, so I was actually going to rebuttal to what you said, but then you came back and gave me the rebuttal to my rebuttal ahead of time. So
yeah. Well, I saw it on your face and I thought I better keep talking until I see smiles. No, I'm just joking.
So my initial rebuttal was, no, you should be questioning the plan. Of course. You have to question the plan.
But otherwise, is it the right one? Yeah.
Right. But you said something interesting. You said, if you go back and you did 100%, I think we'd all be satisfied with where we are. So here's what guys do. They do 70% of the plan and then they question the plan.
Yeah.
Bro, don't worry about questioning the plan until you do 100% of it.
Yeah.
Like 70% ain't going to get you there. It's the 30 you didn't do that is actually going to move the needle. It's the 30 you don't want to do. It's the 30 that's uncomfortable. So yes, question the plan, but actually do the plan fully. It's a go, no go exercise. You either did it or you didn't.
Committed. Yeah.
If there's 10 steps to the plan and you did 7, then you didn't do the plan. Yeah. Not you did 70% of it. No, you didn't do it at all. It's like a package deal. It's like this podcast. You get me and Kip. You don't get to get one or the other. You get both of us. Right? So you got to do 100% of it. But there's another thing I wrote down here too, Kip, is there's a big difference between burning boats versus burning bridges.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I was kind of using the analogy of like, if your family's on the boat and you're going to burn it for your career, bad idea.
Yeah. Maybe wait, because again, that's an obligation, right? You said you're going to get these people safely to shore. Do that first, and then you can worry about burning the boat.
Yeah.
But there is a difference between burning boats and burning bridges. Burning boats is not having a plan B, like, hey, I'm going forward. I'm fully committed to this. Burning bridges is idiotic. You don't need to make it harder on yourself just for the sake of being hard. Like, if there's a bridge, for example, if I'm going to leave an employer, like, I'm not going to walk into his office and yell and scream and talk about how big of a moron he is and F this and F that. And I don't need, no, I'm going to go in there and be respectful and say, Kip, I appreciate you training me over the past 5 years. I appreciate the opportunities you've afforded me. I appreciate everything that you've taught me. I've made a decision for myself and for my family to move forward with this new project, but I want to let you know that you've been a big part of that. And although my path has taken me different now, somewhere different now, I really respect you and I honor you and I thank you for everything that you provided for me. Okay, so that's burning the boats, but I didn't burn bridges with you. And if anything, I solidified the bridge.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you do that to tuck tail and come back, but there may be an opportunity down the road where you can make a connection for me, or I can make a connection for you, or I need a referral or an introduction. We don't need to burn bridges just because we've decided to burn boats.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had so many scenarios in my life where my ego wanted to burn a bridge. And I thank the Lord I did not do it.
Totally.
Because those relationships came back around. I ended up knowing someone who knew that person, like so many scenarios. And it's even happened to me where someone burned a bridge for me and then I ended up becoming their boss. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man.
It's like, guys, yeah, like don't do that.
Yep.
All right. John Reiners, for believers, where is the line between faith and sovereignty? How do we claim full sovereignty over our lives when the scriptures tell us that everything comes from the Lord?
So this is one, Kip, you and I discussed even hitting on this question, because this is one we get all the time. And we made the decision that we should talk about it because it does get brought up all the time. Here's what I'll say. And I actually talked about this in the Iron Council. Really quick? No.
I think this is critical.
Question. No, you asked the question. Yeah. That's your role, Kip. There's nothing else. No, go ahead.
Let me tee you up. This is so critical. Like, this is like even if you're not a believer, the idea of faith and sovereignty and making a clear distinction of how they're related to one another, I think is so critical. And it's even more so for anyone that has a religious belief in a higher power. You have to get this straight in your head. Proceed.
We even got the same word. All right. So this is a question that got brought up on Friday's call in the Iron Council. Were you on Friday's call or were you out?
No,
Friday?
I was mustering.
Okay.
Mustering.
I like that. So we talked about this on Friday's call because somebody else brought it up. And here's what I said to that individual. And look, I'm just going to talk about it from a spiritual, religious perspective right now. That God, one of the greatest blessings that God gave us is free agency, free will. Like that is a blessing through scripture that we know he has bestowed upon us. Because here's the deal. If Kip, you and I and everybody listening did not have free agency over our lives, what would be the point of this existence? There would be no point to being here. There'd be nothing we need to learn. There'd be no way that we need to grow, no challenges we need to face, no hardships that we need to deal with and improve and get better from. There would be no point to being here, but we're here. So we know that we're here for a reason, and we're here to be challenged, to be tested, to learn, to grow, to develop. And the only way we can do that is if God has granted us agency over our own lives. Now, that doesn't mean we get to absolve ourselves of the consequence or the responsibility that comes from making choices, but it does mean that we get to make our own. So in his infinite wisdom, God said to you, I give you sovereignty over your life. I give this to you. And that's a gift to do what we want to do with it. It doesn't always go according to plan. It never goes according to plan. It doesn't always work out the way we would like. We don't always make the best choices. But the fact remains that we have sovereignty over our own lives, and God has given that to you. Now, let me give you another scenario. Let's say that you're 50 pounds overweight or more, and you've really wanted to get in shape. And so you decide to look into some coaching, and you hired a trainer, and he gives you a workout plan. He tells you what your program's going to be. He works you through your macros and your micros, and he teaches you about nutrition, and he gives you meal plans, and he gives you all of this stuff. Would you ever say to yourself that because somebody else gave you a plan for working out, training, lifting weights, and eating, that you have relinquished your sovereignty? No,
because it's still a choice to execute against said plan.
You would never say you'd relinquish your sovereignty. And so by choosing to follow the gospel of Christ or any other gospel or doctrine, it doesn't matter what it is, do you believe that you are giving up your sovereignty by voluntarily making a choice to follow a path that you believe will serve you well? Of course not. The loss of sovereignty is involuntary, and it's done typically through manipulation, coercion, or force, meaning that some employer or some person or some organization manipulated you, or some army forced you and took away your rights and your freedoms. They took from you. It's not that you gave, they took from you. That's the difference. So by choosing to follow God's path, you're not relinquishing control. You're making a voluntary choice to live a path that you think will serve you well for whatever reason. And I'm not going to judge what that is, but you think that will serve you well. That's a sovereign choice that you made. And I commend you for making that choice, but it isn't at odds with God's sovereignty or dominion over this world and all of universe and all that we know. It just isn't.
Yeah. And I think there's a sense of honor that comes from taking something voluntarily and choosing to do something with it.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine our children, if you, whether it's, I don't know, financials, or you grant your kids gifts and they do nothing with their gifts, right? Because, and as we know, talents require action and development. It's very similar in the sense of we need to take what has been granted to us and honor it by doing something with it, by acting upon it. And in your example of the gym, if we go with the gym theme here, is, can you still give credit to the gym that said, hey, you know what, if it wasn't for some of this equipment and the weights and the membership in which you've granted me, I wouldn't be able to work out and grow physically in the way I am without this gift of gym? The answer is, yeah, you should be grateful for that gift and grateful for the training and the plan that you didn't even know about, right? That's not taking credit away from the Lord in regards to recognizing the role and the position and the things that have been granted to you.
Well, and it's also, Kip, not taking away any of your effort either, because let's just take ABC Gym. How many people have a membership to ABC Gym and don't do anything with it?
Yeah.
Like, just because it's there and it's a resource doesn't mean that you're actually utilizing it effectively. So there's two different things. You've got the environment, you've got the space, and then you've got you who has to use it. But I wrote a couple of things down here too, Kip. One of the things you talked about is taking something and making it better. That's actually very masculine. You think about what we as men do. We take raw materials and then we manipulate them, and we use tools to chop trees down to turn into houses and lumber and turn into paper. Like we as men take raw materials, raw goods, and repurpose, repackage, combine, do a lot of manipulation, use tools on to create productive outcomes for ourselves and other people. Like, technology is another great example. Technology is amoral. Money is amoral. All these things around you, this environment that you live in, is amoral. It isn't until you as a man acts upon it and decides to put it to good use and turn it into a tool. You take tools, for example, and you're trying to mine iron ore and metal and steel out of the ground. Okay, well, that was a raw resource, and we used it effectively to create a productive outcome. Now, but there's another question in here, and this is something I've pondered on a lot, is destiny and fate, these types of words, versus free will, especially when it comes to God. Because I'll have a lot of people ask me, for example, if if God knows all, if he's infinite in his wisdom, then he would know the path that we're going to walk, right? Like you would agree. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I would.
So does that take away our free will? No, it doesn't. Here's why. Even though he may know the path you're going to walk, you don't. And so you're still making a choice free of knowing the outcome, which means you have free will, even though he may already know what you're doing. These are philosophical questions that I think of late at night and can't sleep. It's either late at night, it's either this or jujitsu. That's all I think about when I go to sleep, and I can't go to sleep, and that's how it works.
Well, and it's easy to relate when you think if you're a parent, right? Like, like so many times, what's going to happen if your kid does A, B, C. You and you just sit back and you go, oh man, they're going to crash and burn, or they're going to get hurt, or whatever. And you let them choose sometimes, so that way they'll learn. So no, jujitsu is super funny. I was in a sales meeting this morning. No joke. This is how it goes. I'm sitting right next to this other guy and we're talking, and I look down and I see his arm right by me. And I thought,
I'm going to
grab here. I could wrist lock him. Like immediately my first thought is like, how would I hurt him from here? It's so funny.
It is.
And you laugh because it's so true all the time. Man. I'm like, I walk around like at a store. I'm like, kick the back of the leg, check, get his neck, I'm like, it's on my head all the time.
It's awesome. I do the same. I don't know that I go that far, but like when I put my head on my pillow, the first thing my mind goes to is like jujitsu. And then I can't sleep. And I'm like, okay, if he does this, then I'm going to do that. And then, or I go through a move and, like my buddy I train with, he's a black belt, Ryan Daggett, he'll destroy me like he always does. And then at night, I'm like, how did he do that? Okay, wait, what did he do? Wait, but then how did he get to that position? Well, what were his feet doing? And it's a blessing and a curse.
Yeah. In fact, at our last main event that night, I worked through my mind. I even grabbed Clint in the hotel. I'm like, hey, can you be a dummy for me? I just want to kind of go over some sequences, just make sure I'm good for tomorrow. Yeah. He's like, yeah, sure. We went over them. I couldn't sleep. For like 3 hours, I was like walking through sequences in my head. It just got on my brain. And I was like, oh man. So
it's awesome.
Anyhow,
it's cool. I like it. Even though I get less sleep, I still like it. All right. What's next?
Billy, with your recent monster whitetail harvest, how do you utilize your meat? Jerky, ground, steak? What is your favorite dish to make with venison meat or any game? Jerky at all?
You're asking the wrong guy. Like, I'm not. So here's usually what I do when I take it to a butcher. When I take a deer to a butcher, usually what I do is like, of course, the backstrap. I usually keep the backstrap in the tenderloin for myself. I don't turn that in. I pull the backstrap and tenderloin out myself, and then I'll just cut them up into little steaks, on the backstrap. And tenderloins are pretty easy because they're semi-small. But usually what I'll do at a butcher is I will usually quarter it, and I'll give it. And I've broken down animals all by myself. If I'm going to do it, I'll do it myself. That's fine. And then I make as much roast as I possibly can out of just the bigger pieces of the hindquarters. And then I will get some of it as jerky, but the majority of it, if it's not a roast, it's not the backstrap, it's not the tenderloin, I usually have them cut it with some tallow or beef fat and just turn it into burger. That's what I do personally. Yeah. As far as best meals, whatever, it doesn't matter. Like I like stew, venison stew is really good. I love the roast that we have. Backstrap, you don't need to do anything to it. My good friend Brandon Lilly, when we were out there in Minnesota, he cooked up 2 or 3 hearts that we had. And I normally don't like the texture of heart, but the way that he prepared it and he chopped it up and the stuff that he did with it, it was so good. I'm not a cook. I need to get that recipe from him and give it to my wife because I'm not going to do it, but my wife will. But that's usually what I do. I'm a pretty simple man. Just give me the roast, give me the back straps, and grind the rest down with some beef fat, and we'll call it good.
Get some burgers out of it.
That's what we do. Yeah.
Yeah, man. I've seen so much. Like we've had guys, this, my dad was a wild game butcher as a kid.
That's right.
That's the reason. Yeah. That's the reason we never went hunting, because that was like busy season.
Yeah.
But no joke, man. We've had people come in and like with an elk and like, jerky it all. I'm like,
really?
What the crap? Oh,
what a waste
like
to me. I'm like, that's a waste.
Well, my dad had a really good jerky, recipe that a lot of people loved. Yeah.
He had a reputation.
Yeah. Yeah. We had a huge smokehouse for just massive amount of jerky, but yeah, that's funny. All right, Justin.
But what do you do? What would be your go-to on a mule deer or whitetail?
I'd be similar to you. I'd do all the major standard cuts, get as many cuts. And then out of the scraps, what I call the scraps, I'd just probably hamburger it and then jerky the rest. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Cool.
It's pretty good. All right. Justin Herzl, what to consider when to speak and when to hold your tongue. I need this because I probably speak way too much.
Yeah, I do too. And I end up probably more than I need to putting my foot in my mouth. I think I'm having a hard time answering this question, but I think really probably what you ought to do is examine your motives.
Like, is this ego? Am I just hearing myself talk? Am I just trying to sound good?
Yeah. And only you can identify what that is. And I've heard guys, and even at times I like to talk. I like the sound of my own voice. Obviously, I mean, it's what I do for a living, but I have identified times where I'm just like yapping for the sake of yapping because I like the sound of my own voice, or I want to feel important. So it takes a really honest look at yourself as to whether or not you're doing it for yourself or you're doing it for other people. And if you do it for other people, I think the way that you're going to deliver something is going to be significantly more genuine, and it's going to land more effectively because you're going to ask questions. I see this actually in the Facebook group quite a bit. Somebody will ask about a scenario, and you'll have 100 comments from guys like, well, do this and do that and do this and do that. And they're all conflicting. It's like, well, hold on a second. Like, how many of you guys are actually asking questions to try to get some context to the situation that's going on? Yeah. And to me, that could be, it's hard to say though, because even somebody who offers advice could feel like they're coming from the right place. It's such a hard thing, and it's very personal, but I would say examine your motives. Are you trying to hear yourself talk? Or are you genuinely offering feedback? But there's also another side to this. Sometimes guys will be quiet when they should speak up. If you see something dangerous or something needs to be shared or something needs to be said, or you need to defend a position, then you have an obligation to speak up. And so a lot of guys won't speak up because they're afraid, or they're worried about how it will come across, which is also a very egotistical motive. So ego can show up in one of two ways. You're going to overtalk or you're going to undertalk. And so you need to be really truthful about what your motive is. And then I think you're going to have a better decision as to whether or not you should speak up or not, and just listen.
That's cool. This was on my mind a lot this past couple of days at that muster, something that Jocko shared that I thought was like, yeah, that's pretty crazy. And he said that, so there's like 500-600 people there at this event. He had zero communication around slides, music, food, the lanyards, the workbook. He said when someone asked him to sign the workbook, that's the first time he's ever even seen it before. Right? He had almost zero communication around any of those things. Now, part of this is decentralized command and ensuring that like people are empowered or whatever, but part of it also is trust. And he talked a lot about of course, building relationships, but also getting people's, now these are Kip's terms, not Jocko's, but getting people's buy-in requires them to come to conclusions on their own, which often is more in the area of a question than it is you telling them. Right. And it kind of goes back to what you're saying is like making sure they're in line with the desired outcome that, like you've mentioned in the past, the commander's intent, and then let it be. And I really took away from that. It's like, how often am I speaking saying, oh, are we doing this? And, oh, are we doing that or whatever? And it's not necessary at all. And I'm just quasi micromanaging, making sure I sound important and et cetera. Right. When it's probably would have been totally okay for it just to be handled the way it was going to get handled.
Maybe better.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the other thing that I really, if you don't mind me sharing, because I really thought this was really interesting is, who used the analogy of the bank account, the emotional bank account? Who was that? Was that Stephen Covey?
I don't know. I've heard it so many times. I don't know who, I've heard of the relationship bank account. I so many times, I don't know who originally said it.
Yeah. So Echelon Front, they talk about your leadership capital. And you only have so much leadership capital, and that you should also be mindful of that as well. And I think it kind of relates to this is if you're speaking all the time, it loses its value a little bit.
Oh, definitely.
So choose when you're going to speak. So that way it's even more impactful, and treat it as some capital or maybe a bank account balance, almost like we've heard with the whole emotional bank account. So
yeah, no, it's a good point. I also wrote down here, it's a good time to speak and to shut up if you know your place.
Yeah.
Like, for example, if I went to muster and Jocko's on stage, I'm not going to raise my hand and talk and pontificate on all the things that I know about leadership. Because it's not, now that's a stupid example, but it's also true.
But people do it all the time.
All the time. So you have to know your place. And here's another way you can know your place. Did somebody ask for your opinion? Like how many guys give unsolicited feedback? I get it quite often. And I try to ascribe noble intentions to it. I think genuinely people are trying to help, but we just suck at communication. Not just them. All of us suck at communication. We're all inferior. We need to work on that. But if nobody asked you, probably the default is just to keep your mouth shut.
Totally.
Now, if somebody asked you, there's a tactful way to do it and a tactful way to bring it up. But unless they asked, the default should be not really my place to talk about it.
Totally. One thing I used to say when I was a battle team leader in the Iron Council, and guys were soliciting feedback, I would tell guys that take the feedback. That's it. Like, don't reply to it, because then you discredit what the person gave to you. And not only that, but you cheapen it a little bit. And you don't have to protect your ego, right? So if you gave me some advice and you're like, hey, and I asked for, I'm like, hey, Ryan, what's some correct, great ways to foster my relationship better with my wife? What are your top 5 recommendations? And you gave them to me. And then right after, instead of saying, thank you, Ryan, I really appreciate that, instead, I went, oh, you know what? Well, I already do this and I did this and what, and then you're like, your thought process is like, F you, right?
That's exactly what I will never give you advice again.
Exactly. So don't I don't have to protect my ego and let oh, I already do 2 of the 5. No, just say thank you. And then move and accept the advice. But far too often, we get advice from people. We immediately have to reply back and explain, what we're already doing and whatever. And it's like, well, are you listening then? Right. I don't know. That is just another thought.
No, you're right. And I was going to say, by saying thank you, and that's the appropriate response, by the way. Like if I said, Kip, what do you have for me? And you gave me a couple ideas. The appropriate response is thank you. I'll have to consider those. I'll have to think on that.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to have to process that. I appreciate you sharing that with me. That's it. And just because you say thank you doesn't mean that you have to accept it all, that you have to embrace it all, that you even have to act on it. It's kind of like getting pulled over and getting a ticket and the cop says, sign here. You're not admitting guilt. You're just saying you received the ticket.
Yeah.
So by saying thank you, you're not saying that you're going to implement everything, that you're not going to do all that person said. You're just saying thank you for sharing some value with me. And then I'm going to have to take it and I'm going to have to process it and work through it. And I'll come to my own conclusions because I'm a grown ass man. But thank you. I appreciate you sharing with me. Period.
Totally.
All right. What else we got?
All right. Cody Drody, with 18 years old being the age in which kids become an adult, do you feel in this day of age, 18-year-old is still the age you let them fail? This is such a loaded question. I love it. So anyhow,
I mean, you should be letting them fail by the time they're 2 years old.
I know, but let me finish. Right. This is good. This is good. All right.
Okay.
So you let them fail. What I mean, do you feel that the age number still applies to this day of age? It's different, or have we deemed it different? My kids is making some horrible choices as an 18-year-old. Do I sit back and watch it go down into the dumpster fire, or stay on her ass? FYI, she has moved out of the home. Her boyfriend is a senior, and she opted not to go to college as he convinced her not to leave him. So she's doing nothing with her life, had a $26,000 scholarship for academics and wasted it.
Well, I don't know if she wasted it necessarily, spending more than, it was $26,000, but she's going to have to spend $100,000. That could have been a waste too. There's so much to unpack here.
Yeah.
So here's what I wrote. 4 communication styles. There's 4 ways to communicate generally. And every way you communicate with another individual falls into one of these 4 camps.
Am I hearing a future Friday field note?
They've probably done 12 of them already on this particular topic, but yeah, maybe we can delve into it deeper if you guys want. But okay, so the first one, and these aren't in order, but the first one is passive. And that's what Cody's saying. Like, do I sit back and let her flounder? That's passive, right? I'm going to sit back. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to let her flounder and let her figure it out. Passive.
And criticize her and show her my body language next time I'm around and talk.
Well, that's different. No, that's different.
Oh, okay.
That's a different. That's different. So passive is do nothing. Just hands up in the air, indifferent, nothing. Okay. Number 2 is aggressive. Why are you making these dumb decisions? You're so dumb. You're making mistakes. Your boyfriend's a loser, blah, 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 blah. That's aggressive. Okay. The third one, that's what you alluded to just a second ago, passive aggressive. You make comments under your breath. You criticize behind her back. You talk shit, but you don't really actually ever address it with her. You complain, you gripe, and you moan. That you're passive aggressive, right? You're sarcastic about it. You make little jabs, like inappropriate jabs to try to like cloak as kindness, but really you're just trying to get at her. That's passive aggressive. The 4th communication style is assertive. And assertive knows what to do when. When do I speak up? And what tone do I use? How do I communicate this? When should I be communicating? When should I not? To go back to our last question. Yeah. If I'm going to say something, how do I say it in a way that's going to produce favorable results? That's what an assertive person would do. It doesn't mean that you're going to salvage people of their feelings or the way that they're going to deal with it, but you are going to address things in an appropriate way that moves the needle forward. And so you're asking Cody whether it was Cody, right?
Yes, sir.
So you're asking whether you should be passive or aggressive. Neither. You should be assertive. That's your daughter, man. You should be constantly communicating with her. That doesn't mean you're going to rescue her, because that might be aggressive. Even to rescue her might be aggressive.
And can we say, Ryan, is it safe to say that everything that you're saying and the advice you're giving is applicable to all age groups at this time?
Yes, because assertive is based on the other person.
Yeah. Age, maturity, situation,
this
personality
need from me in order to move the needle. So what my 2-year-old needs from me is potentially a timeout and a quick conversation about why they can't bite their sister. An 18-year-old, what they might need from me is a hug and I love you and I want to support you. And what questions do you have about your future? And is this the person that you think is going to lead you to that point, and have a meaningful, deep, significant conversation? You wouldn't have that same conversation with a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
But look, also, it's also assertive to say, hey, look, hon, you're 18 years old. You made the decision to move out. You earned your scholarship. You walked away from that, and you've made the decision to get a job. You've also made the decision to move out and get a place, or maybe even move in with your boyfriend. I don't know the situation. And so because you've made that decision, I'm going to take a step back and allow you as a grown woman to make those decisions. But no, if things don't go according to plan, that you can reach back out to me and we can come up with some solutions. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to move back with me and mom. It doesn't mean that we're going to loan you money. It means that we're going to have a discussion at that point and know that we're here to support you in whatever decision that you need to make. That's hard to do with a daughter, with a son, but that's what an assertive individual would do. And therefore, you're not going to burn any bridges. You're not going to alienate the relationship. You're honoring her as a young woman who's independent and capable of making good choices. And also you're letting her know that, hey, If things don't go according to plan, I'm still here to support you. I'm still your dad. And I will do what I can do. It doesn't mean that I'm going to go back to passive and let you railroad me by moving in and taking all my money. It means we're going to have a conversation about it at that point. So think about those 4 communication styles and become an assertive communicator versus a passive or aggressive or the snarky passive aggressive.
What would be the mindset for each of those? Because I really do feel that there's a different mindset that you would have to execute those different communication styles.
Well, it's a selfless desire for long-term growth of an individual. That's how an assertive person communicates. It's a selfless desire for long-term growth of the other person.
And it's selfless because your willingness to have the uncomfortable conversation.
Yes.
For the greater benefit of that individual that you care about.
Correct. Because what a lot of people will say is, well, they'll know, for example, they need to have a real heavy conversation with an employer or an employee or a wife or a daughter in this case. And they'll say, well, I don't want to have that because I don't want to alienate them or push them away or make them feel bad. I doubt that's the real motive.
Yeah.
I think the real motive is you don't want to have that conversation because you want to spare yourself of the hardship of the conversation and the discomfort of the conversation. And so that's not selfless. That's actually selfish.
Yeah.
And then the long-term growth component of that is important, because if my daughter came to me and said, hey, Dad, things aren't working out and Billy moved out and he doesn't want to be with me anymore, can I move home? The short-term solution is to say, yes, move home and let me give you all the money. But that's not a long-term strategy, and it's certainly not going to help her over the long haul. So that's why you have to have both factors. It has to be a selfless desire for long-term growth of that other individual. And if you do that, I really think you're going to make some great decisions as a father, whether your child's 2 or 18 or 40, you're going to make some great decisions if it's a selfless desire for their long-term growth. And this applies to your wife, to your colleagues, coworkers, employees, community members, neighbors, siblings, daughters, sons, etc.
Got it. Matthew Whitehead, my mother has been diagnosed with breast cancer for over a year now. What is the best way to support her emotionally through this rough time and not forget my emotional health as well? I find myself so caught up on helping her that I forget to make sure that I'm okay.
Well, so she has, his mother has breast cancer. Is that right?
Yeah.
So I assume that she's fully there. She's mentally, cognizant in a way. Like everything's fine mentally. It's just physically she might be diminished and has some health issues and tired and et cetera. Yeah. So you just need to have a conversation with her. Like, you think she wants you to be just taking care of her forever, like hand over foot? Like, she doesn't want that. She wants you to live your life. So the conversations I would have with my mother would be, hey, Mom, like, I'm going to come visit you on every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or what. I'm just throwing out arbitrary visits here, but Monday, Wednesday, Friday afternoon, I'm going to come here and I'm going to spend a couple of hours with you each evening. I'm going to make you dinner on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. But on Tuesdays and Thursdays, like, those are times I won't be able to because I'm going to be with my family, or I'm going to be training and exercising. And then you just create and establish those boundaries and you communicate those to her. She's a grown woman. Like, she understands that. She wants you to be happy. She wants you to take care of herself. So you guys come up with whatever schedule that is, whatever support that looks like. But you can't have that if you haven't established any boundaries. And also if you haven't communicated them with her. Like, you're working on a bunch of weird assumptions right now that may or may not be true. You're just guessing. She's a grown woman. Like, get her involved in this situation. Tell her exactly what you said to me. Hey, Mom, I want to be here and support you. You've raised me and I love you and I want to be here and I would sacrifice for you. But I also want to make sure that I'm taking care of myself and that I'm leading my own family, if that's the case, effectively. And I really want to have this conversation about what you need from me, what I can give you, what expectations you have of me, what expectations I would have of you, and how I can still live my life in the wake of this. Holy cow. Are you kidding me? You don't think she would be completely and deeply respectful of a conversation like that? Of course, 100%, without any doubt in my mind, she would love a conversation like that.
and honored that you would talk to her about it that way.
She's not a child, man. She's your mom. She raised you and potentially your siblings. Like treat her like a woman, not like a child, and have these conversations with her, and you two decide what's going to work best. Not me, Kip, not you. You two decide what's going to be best. She might even say, I don't want you here all the time. You're bugging me. Like, you're here all the time treating me like a baby, and I'm a grown woman. I'm capable. Like, please leave me alone. Like, give me some space. She might actually think that, but she's not willing to say it because you haven't led and opened up with that conversation. So you got to find out what the limits are and what the boundaries are.
Yeah, I like it.
I mean, it's true though. Don't you think that's true? I would think
it's totally true. And one thing that I've had a conversation with my mom about, like, a fulfillment as a parent later in their years. And one thing that she told me years ago was nothing makes, and this is at least for her, nothing makes me feel more fulfilled as a parent as seeing you successful and happy. And so now knowing that, I make sure to communicate what's going on in my life. Right. And because that feels like, hey, I did my part as a parent, you know what I mean? And that my son is happy and life is good. Like, that's a good thing. Yeah. They don't want me miserable, feeling sorry for them.
That's a good conversation to have. I'm glad I had a conversation with my mom. This was probably 2 or 3 weeks ago about long-term care. You know, like I don't want to talk about that, but my mom's in her mid 60s, and in the next 10 years, 15 years, like, it's likely that there might be some situation where we need to make sure that's taken care of. And she lives on the West Coast. I live on the East Coast. And I told her, I said, Mom, I'm not moving out there. I'll move you. Look, we have the financial means. I'll move you out here. She's like, I don't want to live in your house. I do not want to live in your house. And out of respect, she's saying that.
Yeah.
I said, there's an incredible long-term care facility right down the road, and we would help you take care of that cost, and you could be close to me and Trish and be close to the kids. Like, I don't want to have that conversation, but the alternative is never having that conversation, not respecting it, not respecting her not respecting me, and then creating a much more difficult circumstances than it would need to be if we just had the conversation about it.
Totally. That's our lot, man. I mean, that's the next lot. I mean, those are the conversation I've had with my parents. Where you guys at financially? What debts do you have? I'm trying to, luckily they're open to it, to have the conversation. And so,
yeah. And my mom, I'm the executor on her trust, the secondary executor. Her husband is the first, obviously. But she sent me all of her estate planning documents, advanced care directives, which is your basically your health stuff if you become incapacitated. Like, we're having these conversations. It's important that we do. And I think in this case, it's very important that you talk with your mother about expectations from each other, so you guys get on the same page and you're not guessing about it. She's probably asking the same question of herself that you're asking right now. So just like get together and talk about it.
All right. Anthony Novak needs some help from a brother. He says, if my job requires me to be gone 2 weeks at a time as a truck driver, how can I maintain, or ideas on how to maintain my relationship with my wife and my young children?
I was going to say it's easy. I don't think it's easy. I think it is pretty simple. There's a lot of things that you can do, especially with the technology that we have between FaceTime and social media and just picking up the phone and calling. But there's other things that I think would go a long way if you were to surprise them while you were gone with things that are important to them. So it might be nice just to send a bouquet of flowers to your wife occasionally, midweek or mid 2 weeks, and say, hey, hon, I'll be home next weekend. I love you, care about you, thinking about you. Or, maybe your kids, I don't know, they love some kind of weird thing that you happen to be on the road and you see something that they might like and you take a picture with it. Like, it doesn't have to cost you anything. You just take a picture with it. Or one thing I've seen guys do is they will take a picture of their family and they'll carry it with them. And then whenever they're somewhere, they'll actually take a picture with them and with their family, like, hey, you guys are here in spirit with me. Or I've even seen guys have some sort of little, either a Barbie or an action figure. And, they'll be in Nebraska, for example. in the cornfields. And it's like, you take a picture of Barbie in the cornfields and you send it to your little daughter. And it's like, hey, look, Barbie's in Nebraska in the cornfields. And you make them feel included in what you're doing. Man, I think that would go a very, very long way. But the key is to stay in touch, do it in a personal way, and do it in an interesting and unique way. And always have it be fun or surprising, or unexpected. I think will go a really long way. That's what I would suggest.
Yeah, I agree.
Outside of your normal stuff like call and that kind of stuff, of course.
Yeah, nightly prayers. I think consistency is probably key.
Yeah.
Right. Just consistency, not hot and cold. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I didn't even consider that, but yeah, that's a great idea. Nightly prayers. I like that. Cool. Let's take one or two more, Kip.
All right. Sounds good. Kelby Jones. Long question. He says, my have a very weird dynamic. So it's not too long though. So here we go. My sister's 27 with 5 kids from a mentally and physically abusive husband. She goes off and on with him and the other guys, always partying and hooking up with other guys. Her husband is just as bad. Yeah.
Stop. Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm going to let you continue in a second.
Straight to the point. Okay, good.
All right. But here's the point. Here's what I would say. That's your sister. She's a grown woman. She can make her own choices. Be the best damn uncle those kids have ever had. Period. Yes. Still continue to serve your sister, continue to love her, invite her to be part of the family, but she's making bad choices. You know it. That's what you're talking about here. I already know where you're going with this. You're going to say, what can I do for my sister? And how do I get her on the path? She's a grown woman. You at this point need to open your arms and your heart to help her to the degree that she is desiring, and then be the best damn uncle those kids have ever had. Am I wrong on what the rest of the question is asking about?
There's a little bit more to it.
Okay, let's hear it.
Okay, so ultimately, I'm paraphrasing. Grandma's in assisted living. Sister is living in her house, which is
grandma's house.
In grandma's house, which he is actually his house, and he's the power of attorney of, and they're kind of taking advantage of the situation.
Okay, hold on. Who owns the house? Grandma or this guy?
Grandma, okay. But it is his in the will.
So it's not his. He's just the power of attorney.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. All right.
Got it. Sister's taking advantage of grandma. And so he's getting to this point where like, hey, man, you know what? I feel like just wash my hands of it. Too much drama. Not sure how he should approach it and express his feelings and dealing with this situation.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, there is that actually is a divergent from what I had thought. Actually, I went a different path. All right.
Well, I still think your point's just. I mean,
what I said is maybe still be accurate, sure, but this took a little twist here. Yeah, I mean, look, I think what you probably need to do at this point is get the other family members involved and see like if there's mom in the picture or other siblings, and kind of figure out, this is not to pit them against your sister or anything like that, but you actually have a fiduciary responsibility. I hope you understand that. You have
your grandma has given you. Yeah.
You have a fiduciary responsibility. And so if you're not, there's legal ramifications of this as well. So like there is an obligation and responsibility. And I think that you need to have some serious conversations with your sister. Now that's probably in all likelihood going to alienate some of the relationship. It will. And if you're not willing to do that, because you agreed to be the fiduciary, you agreed to this. If you're not willing to honor and uphold grandma's desires and wishes, then yes, you have to resign that position. You have to, because you're not, we talk about it all the time. You're not being a man of your word. You gave your word that you would administer the estate the way that your grandma had a desire for you to administer. Is she still alive? Grandma?
Yeah. She's just in a living facility.
Yeah. So you made that commitment. And if you're going to honor that commitment, then you have to honor it fully. And if you're not going to honor it, then you have to step aside and you have to talk with grandma about that. That to me is clear as day. It's not very clear because you are emotionally wrapped up in that, but that is the solution. That is the answer. I would talk with sister first and because you already know what grandma wants. And grandma may be mentally on the decline where she can't tell you any longer, but that's why she did it before she got to that point. So you would take care of this. So kudos to her, for grandma, for taking care of all the stuff ahead of time. But yeah, since you already know the desire of grandma, you really need to talk with your sister and tell her what her desire was, and why you have a legal and moral obligation, responsibility to follow these directives and carry it out or step down.
Yeah. Got it.
Tough, man. Tough.
Thomas Zimmerman, another tough scenario. I'm a party of one as far as refusing to bow to the vaccine mandate at work. I am now on leave without pay until I decide to take the shot to retain my position or try to find work elsewhere. Recommendations for next steps.
Like you already know what they're like. I get frustrated with these questions because it's there. Like, you're there. You only have one of two choices: get a new job, which you can do. There's 10 million available jobs in the United States.
Good time
it may
to get
not
a job
be
right
exactly
now.
what you want it to be. All right. But like, you can go get work for sure. 100%. Well, Ryan, but I have to move. Yeah. Well, it's a tough situation. So you can either do that or you can get the shot. Like, there isn't some magical third answer that I can give you here. Like, I can't go to your employer and convince them that, hey, he's a great worker. These people are delusional. They've lost their minds. They're so manipulated at this point. So make your choice. You're going to go get the shot, and then you can go back to work with your current employer. And if you do, live with that choice. That's a choice you're making as a grown man. And I'm not going to hold that against you. I'm not going to judge you for that. It's not my position. Like, you have to make your decision, just like you, Kip, and me have to make our decisions. So make your decision. And sometimes making choices means that you have to choose between two less than favorable choices. Sometimes making choices mean you have to choose between two very favorable choices. Sometimes the answer is clear and sometimes it isn't. And this time, I think that, clearly you don't want to take the shot. Otherwise, you already would have done it now. So find another job. And also, everybody else who's listening, let this be a reminder to get your shit in order. Get your financial house in order. So if at any point you have to leave your employment for any reason, whether they're asking you to get a shot or they're asking you to jeopardize your morals, or you just don't like working for them anymore, that you have enough money set aside where you're going to be okay and you don't have to sacrifice your standards and your morals in order to put food on the table. Get your financial affairs in order. Save the money, invest, set money aside, get out of debt, build up food provisions, build up other provisions for rainy days. Do this now so that in 6 months or a year, you're not asking Kip and I what you should do about not being able to have a job. But I think in this particular case, either take the shot or go find a new job. Period.
Yeah. And I would, if you don't mind me adding to it, stop thinking that there's stability just because you work for an employer.
Right. 100%.
That drives me mad. Everyone always, I work for a company, so I have stability versus if I work for myself. You tell me right now how much more stability Zimmerman has in this instance.
Mm-hmm.
He may be great at his job. He may kick ass. And guess what? No stability whatsoever.
Yep.
Out of his control. So, and I think it's healthy for us to look at our employers, if you work for someone, and see it as a contract. You're the CEO of yourself, as Andy Frisell would say. Treat your employment as that, right? This is an agreement between me and another company. You're right. And it's just as stable or unstable as if you work for yourself. In fact, I would argue that working for yourself has more stability because there's a direct correlation between the work that you do and your employment versus when you work for a corporation. Sometimes there is no correlation. You're just a cog in the wheel, and the decision of your employment is based upon something other than your work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great point. Cool. Well, we got through a lot today, man. Really good questions, powerful questions. I don't even know on some of those questions if we gave very clear, succinct answers, but hopefully we gave you some things to consider. That's really what the whole goal of the podcast is to do, is to talk as men about some of these hard and difficult choices and decisions and life situations. And hopefully we can come up with some good solutions moving forward. So I hope we did that today.
Yeah. So our call to action, I think, Ryan, you mentioned already earlier, If you are on the fence in regards to join the Iron Council, that's going to be closing down, or at least the membership to sign up for a period of time will be closed down for maybe 30 to 60 days. So if you're on the fence, execute now, get in the IC. Otherwise, you're going to kind of get pushed off until a later date. So to learn more about the Iron Council, go to orderofman.com/Iron Council. And of course, as always, to follow Mr. Mickler on the socials, you can follow him at Ryan Mickler. That's MICHLER on Twitter and Instagram. Anything else, sir?
That's it, man. Kip, I appreciate you. You always have great insight. It's good to have you back. And guys, we'll be back on Friday. Until then, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.